just finished my reread Blood and Bone by Ian C. Esslemont, one of his novels of the Malazan Empire. Now these books, all the Malazan books, you can reread them multiple times. There's so much in them. But this one, I'm so glad I've reread it because I didn't remember anything at all from it. I could vaguely remember it had something to do with Kalor and Jakaruku, and it's like a jungle setting. That's literally all I could remember from it. So a lot of people say that this is Esslemont at his best. I think even Erickson himself said this is his favorite Esslemont novel. I agree. I mean, it's fantastic. It's really, really good. I like all Esslemont's books. I think they all have value and they're all interesting in their own right. But this one, he really comes into his own, I guess. It just, the writing's superb, the characters are superb, the storyline, the plot, the convergence. It's a great Malazan novel. Interestingly, in sort of the timeline of things, this takes place the same time as The Crippled God. In fact, like in tandem, by the end of this book is after the end of The Crippled God, and there are references to the breaking of Dragnapur, or how Dragnapur has already been broken. And also it's revealed that Stonewielder, a book that he wrote a few years before this, also takes place in the same time as this and The Crippled God. So for example, in Stonewielder, there's a point in time when there's a fragment of the Crippled God that's being guarded by the Corelry Trozen on the Storm Wall, and in Stonewielder, Iron Bars and Blues and those Crimson Guard are going to get it or something, and they see off in the distance Skinner and the Disavowed show up and take it, and they're like, Skinner! And yeah, so that's just sort of one scene. But in this book, we actually are following Skinner, and we get to that point where they travel to Corelry and actually take that fragment of the Crippled God and sort of see Iron Bars off in the distance yelling at them. So that was kind of cool. It is a long book. This version, the mass market paperback, is 142 pages. It's a very long one, and I'm sure this video will be very long because there's lots of different plot threads, 7 or 8 I would say, that of course all converge at the end. So for the most part it takes place on Jakaruku, this sort of mythical jungle-like place that is ruled by Queen Ardata, the Queen of Witches, who we have seen before in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. She did something to heal Mappo at one point. She has something to do with spiders and webs, and she sort of has a rivalry with Triss, with the Queen of Dreams, the Enchantress, which it's sort of revealed that Triss has, or it's hinted that Triss has sort of taken over some of the aspects of Ardata's territory, or her divine aspect or something. And at the end of this book, I don't know if it's revealed, but they refer to each other as sisters, or at least the Enchantress refers to Ardata as her sister. So they're two kind of sisters. Anyways, so yeah, this jungle, Jakaruku, is where it all takes place. We do have one sort of scene that carries over throughout the whole book that doesn't take place on Jakaruku, that in fact takes place on Malaz Island, or Malaz Isle, Malaz City, in the Dead House. So we have Osurk, the sort of light to Animander's dark. We haven't seen much of him. He's been in a few of the Esslemont books. He's sort of referred to here and there, but aside from Carcanis, I think this is probably the most we get of him. Anyway, so he's in the Dead House. He's gone in there seeking answers, and guess who else is in the Dead House? It's Gothos. I don't know why or how Gothos got to be inside the Dead House. I don't think he sort of holds the same role as Guardian that like Raist does for the Azath House in Rujistan, but Gothos is there. So Gothos and Osurk sort of sit across from each other and have a big stare-down battle for this whole book, and it takes place like over weeks and weeks where they're just staring at each other, and then once in a while they'll break and have sort of a bit of a conversation. I've struggled to sort of grasp what this was all about. I think it was Osurk's trying to find answers to something, or trying to figure something out, and Gothos admits that he is a prick. Gothos is a prick. He's meant to be a prick to sort of annoy or test or sort of jab at Osurk, to sort of get Osurk to sort of figure out whatever he's trying to figure out. And it seems to me that it's something to do with, like, by the end of it, Osurk discovers that it's something about emotional intelligence or self-reflection, and that he's never really learned despite being hundreds of thousands of years old, and he's never really grown, because it's painful to be introspective and to see your own faults and to that sort of thing. I guess that's how it ends. There is one very weird thing that does happen in this encounter. At one point, they hear something outside in the yard. They get up, and Cowl, the sort of Skinner's right-hand man, the high mage of the Crimson Guard, the sort of mage assassin that was equal to Dancer, perhaps, and Topper, who in which book was it? Return of the Crimson Guard? I think it was Return of the Crimson Guard, when Topper fought Cowl throughout the Warrens and finally defeated him, and Cowl threw himself into the Azath yard to be interred in the Azath. Now, once you're in the Azath, you're in there forever. It doesn't matter if you're an Ascendant, an Elder God, whatever. You get in the Azath yard, you're stuck in there. So the fact that Cowl gets out is very strange, but it's sort of said by multiple characters that Cowl can escape because he sort of has commitments elsewhere, or he's sort of preordained to do something else, and it's the vow. Whatever this vow that the Crimson Guard have made, it is precluded Cowl from being held by the Azath House. So that must mean it's very, very powerful. And this sort of what are the Crimson Guard and what is this vow is really hinted at, especially near the end of this book. And I think it is not until the next book, A Sail, that we're going to really find out what it's all about. But for example, at one point they bump into Talana Mas, who is traveling to the Silver Fox's gathering, I think. Although the timeline, this must be after the gathering, so maybe this Talana Mas has missed the gathering. Anyways, and I get the vibe that, and again, I have read A Sail, so this could be knowledge from that I just don't remember, but that the Crimson Guard, their vow is similar to the ritual of Talan. The Talana Mas, or the Amas, had this ritual of Talan where they swore eternal war against the Jagud, and that has turned them into these undead creatures that can turn into dust and float away and reform. And the Crimson Guard has sworn a vow over this holy place, which we actually get a sort of a flashback and see that scene from Shimmer's perspective of the Crimson Guard swearing this vow, and they swear eternal war against the Malazan Empire. As long as the Malazan Empire survives, they're going to oppose it. And when the Crimson Guard members die, they sort of become ghosts that can follow around other Crimson Guard members. And at this book, these ghosts, perhaps because of the setting of Jakaruku and how time, past, present, and future all blend together and are all held one and the same in Jakaruku, or perhaps something to do with this vow they made. The dead are becoming more substantial, and in fact there was one scene where there was like sort of ash or smoke or dust that was left behind by one of these dead brethren. And maybe that hints that they are much like the Talana Mas, or maybe it was just because that was smoky and he is always smoky and covered in ash because he does fire magic. I don't know. Another of the storylines is following the Queen of Dreams, the Enchantress Triss. Enchantress Triss. Gonna have that little apostrophe in there. She gets summoned in, I think it was in Quan, in one of her temples. She sort of comes out of this almost Vitor, Shores of Creation, mercurial Quicksilver goop. She pops out of that and enters sort of the real world. But she sort of is not fully manifesting herself. She's sort of kept a lot of her powers subsided, and she's doing this because she's going to have a confrontation with Ardata, and she doesn't want she wants to sort of come in her weakened state so that Ardata will listen to her, and there won't be a big fight immediately. But she's sort of described as a frumpy, middle-aged mom character. Like she's not like the beautiful young sorceress that you would expect. Anyway, so she pops out at this temple and picks up a bodyguard who is a Segula, Ina. So Ina is one of the 1,000. She's not like one of the top 10, but she is of the 1,000. So she's just like a really powerful Segula. So the two of them, they go down to the harbor, and Triss brings up this ship that's been just sort of like at the bottom of the harbor or whatever. And it's a weird ship. It doesn't have any masts, and it's completely enclosed, which gave me like submarine vibes, but it's not a submarine. Anyways, they take that ship and they're traveling to Jakaruku. And the whole time they're traveling, the Enchantress just sort of stands on the deck, like in like a maelstrom, just standing on top of it. And she is visited by numerous ascendants. And every time she does, Ina sort of pops out to see what's going on. So she's first met by, I think, Opon, first of all. They have a little chat. Then Shadow Throne, who, I mean, the Shadow Throne Dancer's also there. I'm sorry, Cotilion's also there. And then finally, Mael, who she refers to as Bug, which is really cute. And like they hug, and Mael just seems like a great guy, even though he's like the elder god of the sea, who like probably not a great guy, but in this aspect, I think Mael's a great guy. And I don't know. It's not really important what they talk about, but they eventually get to Jakaruku. The third perspective that we see is that of this character known as War Leader, who's got a very long mail coat, big gray beard, looks very unhuman, cold and gray, and he's leading this mercenary unit who their goals are not really outwardly stated, but they're mercenaries. They probably just want to loot and raid, right? So they end up on the southwest of the continent of Jakaruku, where there are these tribes, these people called the Adwami, and they're always infighting, but sometimes they'll raid their northern neighbors, the Thaumaturges, which we'll talk about later. But there's so much infighting that they can never sort of become one big sort of nation, which if they could, they'd be very powerful. But Kalar shows up and he's like, hey, I'm an outsider. How would I be your war leader and lead you all to a massive raid against the Thaumaturges? And, you know, there's a bunch of fighting, but eventually they consent. And our POV character here is not this war leader. It is this Prince Jatal, he's a young guy. He's sort of the lesser son of the biggest tribe in this area. And he's seen as like a scholar and a poet and a philosopher. So he's not seen as the big warrior like a lot of the other people are. And the leader of the other sort of largest tribe is this Princess Andani, and the two of them are their rivals, but over the course of their sort of moving north with this war leader, they fall in love, I guess. It seems like Andani's trying to seduce Jatal, but I guess it's a sort of love. And I think this storyline is one of the best written ones. I mean, there's a lot of like romance in the Malazan world that's sort of seen as the sort of the more poorly rendered parts of that world, but to me, I think Esslemont did a great job with this. So Adani starts seeing the war leader and taking the war leader into her tent, and ignores Jatal after they sort of agree that, hey, you know, if the two of us unite, we can sort of unify the entire Adwami people, and we can like rule as king and queen, and it'll be great. And Jatal's like, yeah, this is great. Like, this woman, I'm in love with her. This is great, fantastic. But then it seems, we only get Jatal's perspective, but it seems that she's now sleeping with the war leader, and she sort of moved on and was cheating on him. Or not really cheating on him. She just doesn't care for him anymore. She's moved on to the older, more powerful man. And the sort of the heartbreak and the rage and the jealousy that Jatal feels is just, it's so real to me, and it was so well written. You really feel for the guy. But I mean, he's young, he's like early 20s, so yeah, the poor guy, I feel bad for Jatal. Anyway, so immediately myself, and I assume anyone else who's read any of the other Malazan novels, which I don't know how many people have only read Esslemont? Probably not that many. But I think the audience, the reader, realizes immediately that the war leader is, of course, Kalor. So Kalor, the High King, who is this, I don't know how old he is. I want to say the crippled god fell 100,000 some years ago, because like aren't we in like, no, because Burned Sleep is only like 14. Maybe it was only 1,400 years ago. I don't know. Anyway, so Kalor used to be the High King, the Emperor, ruling over Jakaruku. And then, of course, this ring of thaumaturges, these 9 or 10, however many, chafed at his rule and called down something to sort of wipe him out. So they called down, ended up pulling the crippled god from whatever realm he exists in to Jakaruku, which sort of wiped the continent, creating a continent of ash that didn't kill Kalor, And then the elder gods, Draconis, Cruel, and Sister of Cold Night, sort of went in and swept up this ashen continent and created what later became the Imperial Warren, and cursed Calor to never ascend. And he cursed them in turn, and blah blah blah. This is the prologue to Memories of Ice. Anyway, so Calor's back on Jacuruku, out for revenge. So his goal is to sort of get revenge on these Thaumaturges, who are still ruling this sort of northeastern part of Jacuruku. Now these Thaumaturges, this is another really cool part of the story. They're mages, but not in a traditional sense. They don't use the warrens, they sort of use the body. So they're very much that mind over matter. The body is just a vessel to be used and molded and shaped. And so they're doing all kinds of bio-horror experiments on people and turning people into sort of animals, draft animals, and their bodyguards are these people that they've sort of have total control over, and they're doing horrible grotesque things to people's bodies, and like vivisections and keeping people alive with no skin, and replacing body parts and mixing and matching and screwing with people's minds and doing all kinds of crazy horrible things. And we get this through the perspective of Jatal. So there's two main cities in the Thaumaturge kingdom. There's the southern one and the northern one. The war leader Calor, he's like, all right, Adwami people, we're going to raid the southern kingdom, the southern capital. It'll be great. We're going to get lots of booty. Let's do it. So they do that, and they don't really meet any resistance. There's not really anyone there. There's a few Thaumaturges, but these Aegon priestesses, these Shadowams, I think they're called, just kind of like they're shamans. Turns out these are priests who worship Calor, convenient for him. They go ahead and they sort of wipe out the Thaumaturges. So the Adwami people march in, and they're sort of unopposed. So then Calor's like, hey, instead of just raiding the southern capital, let's go for the northern capital and take over the whole thing. They're like, yeah, this will be great. Of course, Jatal's like, I don't know about this. He's smarter than the rest of them. But then they go ahead to the northern capital, and again, it's kind of the same thing. They meet some resistance. There's some fighting, but the Thaumaturges aren't there. At this point, Calor sort of dispenses with all pretense, and even the mercenaries he came with, he sort of gets his priests to enslave them. He enslaves the Adwami people, and then he when he realizes the Thaumaturges are gone, he flees to where they've headed, which is east into Himatan, this jungle that is ruled by Ardata. But during the fighting and during all the sort of grotesque horror body experiment things that they come across in the depths of the city, Andani and Jatal kind of make up. And Andani's like, yo, I'm thinking that this war leader guy is Calor. She doesn't get to tell him that, but she's sort of come to this conclusion. She hasn't been sleeping with him. She's just been sort of using him and getting information from him to come to this conclusion. And of course, this is just related to each other as she lays dying, because she got sort of injured during the battle. So Andani dies, which sort of really breaks Jatal, and he's sort of gives up on life and sort of wanders around waiting to die. But then this guy Skarza, who had been a lieutenant of the war leader, one of these mercenaries, who's half Trell, which is cool. We only ever seen one other Trell, I believe. He's like, hey, the war leader betrayed me too. Come on, Jatal, let's go get him. Jatal's like, yeah, let's go kill him. So they set off towards the jungle to find and kill Calor. Another group of people are ex-Malazans. So they are veteran Malazan soldiers, now turned mercenary, being led by this mysterious, well, she's not mysterious, it's Spite. Led by Spite, Sister Spite. Envy's sister, daughter of Draconis. It's Spite. Now Spite, I really like Spite as a character. She's funny in that she's like the embodiment of Murphy's Law. Like, whereas Envy's sort of very demure and elegant and vicious and gets her way and is like powerful, Spite is just like spiteful. She's spiteful, she's angry, she wants things, but she never gets her way, and everything always goes wrong for her. So poor Spite. She's got these Malazan mercenaries, and they're going to the Dolomens of Tien, which are the site of one of the chainings. So the crippled god, when he came down on Jacuruku, like his body was sort of ripped apart on the way down, and parts of him went everywhere, right? Some in Corellery, which caused all those issues there. Some here, some there, some everywhere. It doesn't matter. But one of those pieces was chained, and now during the chainings, all these elder gods and ascendants and people showed up to chain it. Chained in this thing called the Dolmens of Tien, which are a whole bunch of stones with like these magical chains holding this piece of the crippled god over the abyss, basically. But Spites wants it. She wants it. It's not explicitly stated why she wants it, but I believe she just wants it for the power to sort of fight Envy, her sister, because she's spiteful. So using the two Malazan mages, Sour, who is his warren's never, I think it's a Thyr warren, Warren of Light, but his patron is the Enchantress, Queen of Dreams, Triss, and a mage of Minas, mage of Shadow, whose patron is, of course, Shadow Throne. And they're funny characters, and we get this through Merc, the Shadow mage's perspective. So using them, they managed to break a lot of the chains and extract this fragment of the crippled god. But in doing so, Spite herself ends up getting caught with the few chains that remain, and she's sort of held in there. And she's fighting her way out because there's only a couple chains left. But the Malazans are like, we got to get out of here. We've got this fragment of the crippled god. We can't get Spite out without her help. Let's leave. So they just sort of take off into the jungle. And through the course of their explorations in the jungle, not explorations, they're sort of travel through the jungle, Merc begins to communicate with this fragment of the crippled god, who manifests as a young girl and names herself Celeste. Now, she does not feel like the Kaminsod, the crippled god that we know from the other books. Not even the aspect in Krelry, the sort of lady who was quite vindictive and evil. This Celeste seems very pure and innocent, very childlike. And she seems childlike in that she sort of has no prior experiences. I assume since the fall and the chaining, she hasn't been able to develop a personality or consciousness. Anyway, she has, and she sort of uses Merc as a parent. So Merc sort of has to try and give her advice, but he's a parent. He's never been a parent before. He doesn't really know what he's doing, and he doesn't want to use her. So he's a good guy. He doesn't want to use her to his own ends. So he tries to help her. So like I said earlier, we also get the POV of the disavowed. So these are Skinner and those that remained loyal to him and disloyal to Kaz, who Skinner had been a sort of a consort to Ardata and has lived in Jakaruku for a long time, but he's since abandoned her. And it's like, Skinner's not a great guy. He seems to only look out for numero uno. He's betrayed so many people. He only cares about power. But he has gone over to the Thaumaturges and has been recruited as an auxiliary force to their army. So the Thaumaturges have put out an army. That's why when Kalor goes and attacks them, there's not much resistance, because they've sent this massive army along with Skinner and co. east into the jungle to sort of confront Ardata. Ostensibly, the Thaumaturges are doing this because it's just a neighboring power. They want to conquer her, but in reality, they're doing it as the distraction. So the Thaumaturges know that Kalor is coming back, and they're like, the only way we know how to deal with Kalor is when we brought the crippled god down and nuked the continent. So they are planning to do a ritual like that again to deal with Kalor, because they know he's back. But they've sent this army ahead to Ardata as a distraction. But the army doesn't realize this, and the leader of this army is Golan. He doesn't realize this either. He kind of does in the end. So they, it's very funny. They march through this whole jungle, and by the epilogue, they pop out the other end of the jungle at the sea. But through the course of this, like, their armor rots and rusts. They become infected with parasites, and they get diseases and illnesses and infections, and they get attacked by all the denizens of the jungle, which, by the way, there are these sort of soul-taken-like creatures that exist in the jungle that are sort of half humanoid, half animal. Whereas soul-taken can sort of transform from one to the other. These are sort of stuck in place as sort of anthropomorphic animals. Anyways, the jungle just sort of destroys them without even coming in contact with Ardata. And yeah, they pop out the other end, and there's barely a few of them remaining. But all the meanwhile, Skinner and his gang, who is following along with them, get taken away by this priest of the Shattered God. So the crippled god's priest will come up, he'll grab a bunch of the Crimson Guard, he'll the disavowed Skinner and co. He'll transport them to somewhere where there's a fragment of the crippled god, and they have to try and steal it or get it back for him, for the crippled god, who's trying to gather parts of himself to himself. Now this is kind of weird because the crippled god at this point is still sort of seen as the bad guy. Skinner's sort of definitely seen as the bad guy, but in trying to gather parts of himself to himself, is he not fulfilling the wishes of Shadow Throne and Cotillion and Tavor and Co. in the book The Crippled God? I don't know. But anyways, they go to various places and they're getting pieces of the crippled god. For example, like I said earlier, they go to Coral. I think I kept calling it Corelry, which might be the people of Coral, or the Corelry. Anyways, they go to Corel, and fight the Storm Guard, and that's where Blues and Ironbar see them. And that's one of the pieces of the crippled god that they managed to catch. So just to backtrack a bit, they first go to the Dolmens of Tien, where there's supposed to be one, and instead of finding the crippled god fragment there, they find Spite. And Skinner she's like trying to claw her way up, half in her draconic form, and Skinner just sort of goes up and punches her in the face, so she falls back in. Which is not really nice of him, but it's funny because it's Spite. She just can't win. So then they go to the ruins of a Mekros city, which is really cool. The Mekros, they've got these sort of floating masses of wood and like ships that are all combined together and like ice and stuff, and they just float around the ocean. They live there. Apparently they're artificers, which I didn't know. So the fragment of the crippled god there is been put inside of this clockwork automaton. So it's like straight up a robot that's powered by the crippled god. But it's very robotic. It's very funny. It's very cool, very unique to the Malazan world. A robot. Anyways, so Skinner has to fight with it and gets almost drowned, and he loses his sword, which is a big deal to him. But he manages to rip this sort of fragment of the crippled god out of it. So that's the one that they actually get. They at one point, following the one that had been in the Dolmens of Tien that the ex-Malazans and Spite had taken. They sort of jump the Malazans, but the Malazans manage to escape, and Celeste, that fragment, uses her powers to sort of help obscure herself and hide from the Crimson Guard. The third fragment that they go after, the one in Corel, like I said, they actually get that one, but then Spite shows up. She's been flying around as a dragon this whole time, and trying to find a fragment of the crippled god, trying to find the Malazans, but instead she finds the Disavowed with this other fragment they have, and she sort of fights with Skinner and manages to rip the thing from him and then fly off away and saying, "Haha, I'm coming for you, Envy." And it seems like she's sort of got what she wanted. We'll catch up with her later. So Skinner's really mad, like, we had this one fragment, we lost it. We also have the Avowed. So we have Kaz, and we get the POV of Shimmer, who I always got mixed up with Shell, but Shimmer she's the one who uses the whip sword, which is really cool. Like, look up whip sword. It's like an actual thing. It's like, I don't know how many meters long these things are, and they're like really floppy metal, and you like whip them all around. Like, super dangerous weapon to use. Anyways, like in real life, but that's what Shimmer uses. She's also very short, and she's not a mage. We get her POV. So Kaz is in Stratum, the sort of Crimson Guard, not homeland, but the land they rule. These emissaries of Ardata show up, and they're like, "Hey Kaz, we need your help. Ardata is asking for your help. She's under attack by Skinner. She needs you to deal with Skinner. Also, the Dolmens de Tien, there's a crippled god fragment there. Like, stuff's gonna go down." So he's like, "Oh crap, fine, okay, we'll go." So their whole thing is they're traveling up this river in Jakaruku to this capital where Ardata lives, and the whole time they're going up there, it's very dreamlike, and sort of the jungle, like past, present, and future all mixes together, and they're passing out, and things are rotting and falling away. But like I said, at the end we have the convergence where Kaz and the Crimson Guard show up at this capital, which isn't really a city. It had been a city millennia ago, but it's fallen into ruin and been overtaken by the jungle. But anyways, Kaz and Shimmer and the Crimson Guard show up. Skinner and the Disavowed show up. These Malazans, or ex-Malazans, also show up there, and Triss, the Queen of Dreams, and her sort of bodyguard, this Segula, also show up there. And then we have the big showdown between Triss and Ardata. So Triss, of course, is just coming as like a frumpy old woman, a frumpy middle-aged woman, Ardata doesn't recognize her right away. Ardata is very much not like the other gods and ascendants that we see throughout the series. She's much more godlike in that she's been away from humanity for so long that she's doesn't really understand humanity and doesn't has no sort of empathy for them or sympathy or anything like that. She's very much cut off. She has been living in Jakaruku, where she's been holding on to the past, the present, the future. She's been holding on to everything. That's why Jakaruku is such a primeval, ancient place with these old soul taken like beings, and why it's so dreamlike and confusion, because past and present are all commingled together. And anyways, Triss confronts her about this and says, "Hey, we got to talk about your daughter." So it turns out Ardata has this daughter, Lek, who has some sort of deformity. It's hinted at because has this sort of soul taken blood in her, but she's not fully human or fully animal, or she's not even this weird anthropomorphic. She's human-ish, but has like she's kind of crippled. She has a bit of a limp. Her legs are sort of like grotesque and bloated, and she's got sort of gray scaling on her. Anyways, to protect her daughter, that's why Ardata has held on to past, present, and future. So her daughter's sometimes a child, sometimes a young woman, sometimes an old crone. Anyways, Triss shows up and she's like, "You gotta let this go, sister." And they sort of have a big magical confrontation, which we don't really see. But the result of it is that Ardata does give up and sort of flees the material plane, as it will. And though she's still around, she sort of has given up her rule over Himatan, this jungle. And Triss has kind of taken her place. Kind of usurped her in a way, but apparently she did it for the best. And so Triss and her bodyguard, Ina, and the Lek, the daughter of Ardata, they're going to sort of stay there and sort of raise this girl. The disavowed and the avowed have made up. I totally skipped over the biggest part of that. So when they first met Ardata, she says to Skinner, like, "I'll give you one chance. Like, come back to my side." And he's like, "No, I'm moving on with my life, blah, blah, blah." She's like, "So you reject me and my gifts?" Now her gift is this sort of mail, this black scale mail that he wears everywhere, and it makes him basically invincible. Super powerful stuff. And he's like, "Well, you told me no one could ever take this away from me, so you can't take this gift away from me." And she's like, "I can't take it away from you, no, but I can't ask it to come back to me." And so she does, and it turns out all these interlocking plates are all spiders, and the spiders all break apart, and then they eat him and consume Skinner until he's literally nothing but bones. So Skinner actually dies in this, which is huge. And that's when Triss shows up and they have the confrontation. But so the disavowed have, like, they've lost Skinner, they're sort of lost, so they go back with Kaz. And Cowell has shown up and he's like, "I know the truth about the vow, you gotta tell these guys." And he's weird. He's not like, I mean, he's insane, I guess. He's bowing to Kaz, whereas before he had been like Skinner's right-hand man and wouldn't have anything to do with Kaz. But then Cowell sort of leaves again, who knows where he went. By the way, when Cowell escaped the Azath house, of course, who shows up with the guardian of the Azath, Temper, who just like stabs Cowell a bunch of times and is like, Cowell's basically dead, but he's still moving around, which again, the Talanamaz connection with the Avowed, I don't know. So the Avowed are all back together, and Triss, who's now in her sort of form as the goddess, the Enchantress, she's like, "Kaz, the answers you seek, they're on a sail." Which is like I mean, Jakaruku is a mythical continent, but a sail has been mentioned throughout all these books as like, it's a big deal. It's a dangerous place. There is stuff going on in the sail that people want to know about, but they don't know about. Cal Bryn, one of the sort of very prominent Crimson Guard members, is still there. Iron Bars had been part of that contingent, but had managed to escape. So yeah, everything's going to go down on a sail. And she agrees to send all of the Crimson Guard back to Stratum to sort of regroup. The Malazans, it's revealed that they had been fleeing because they had killed a fist in 7 cities. They assassinated this fist because the fist was trying to create another civil war in which 7 cities does not need another civil war. So they sort of cut it out of the root by killing this fist, but then of course they're wanted, so they flee. Triss reveals to them that, hey, it's all come out that this guy was a bad dude and he would have caused another civil war. So like, you're kind of heroes for killing him. You're no longer wanted. So I can send you back to Aren. But they're like, we're gonna sort of send us to northern Getabacus, and we'll sort of feel things out first. So they're gonna go back, and everything will be happy with them. So that's all dealt with and done. But we still have Calor fleeing into the jungle, chasing the Thaumaturges, the actual ruling council of Thaumaturges that we haven't seen throughout this whole book. Now, there's one more perspective that I haven't talked about at all. So it is this girl Sang, which makes me think of Blood. Sang, who is this sort of village girl who lives near the jungle. She's a witch, and it's sort of hinted that she's a priestess. She's received her training from the ghosts of Jakaruku, who have come to her and trained her. Her mother tells her that she is of a matrilineal line of the High Priestesses of Light, which is like an older cult, older than the cult of Ardata, older even than Calor. So she's, I guess, this High Priestess of Light. Her brother had been taken by the Thaumaturges when she was young and turned into a Yakasha, I think they are. These sort of big, almost mindless bodyguards that have this mosaic of glittering stone armor and gems. And they're super powerful, and they're super strong, and they don't need to sleep or eat much, and they also have their tongues cut out. But he defects and goes back to her, and that sets them on the run. They're running from the Thaumaturges, who send out this guy Ponlor, this sort of young Thaumaturge, out to track her down. There's a whole thing where they encounter these bandits, who again, they're all super young. This is like the 20 and under crew. The bandits who attack the Thaumaturge and attack her, and they escape, and stuff happens. And she does come across this guy Old Man Moon, who is actually like an embodiment of the moon, but not really, but he sort of worshipped the moon and became the moon. And I don't know, it's kind of cool. Also, there's a whole thing about how weird in all mythology, it's always the sun that's male and the moon that's female. Why are you male? And he's like, no. Actually, like, the sun is life-giving. It gives life. The moon is just a pale reflection of that. And what gives life? Well, women give life, and females give life in like birth. So that was kind of a cool thing. But anyway, so Old Man Moon helps her out a few times, and anyway, she finally gets to where she's trying to get to, which is this temple of light, this temple deep in the jungle, where she, as High Priestess, can use her powers to stop the Thaumaturges, because she's sort of had a vision that the Thaumaturges are trying to bring down the Stranger, the Jade Banner. If you've read any of the Malazan Book of the Fallen or any of these books, you know that there is this sort of jade comet in the sky. And the Thaumaturges are trying to bring that down to kill Calor. She's trying to get to this temple to use her powers to stop that. The Thaumaturges are also trying to get to the temple to use the power of the temple, this power of light, as a source of power to cause this to happen. And that's where Calor is also running to. So like I said, she's being followed by this Ponlor, this young Thaumaturge who's trying to hunt her down, but eventually he sort of comes to see her side of it and understands what the other Thaumaturges are doing, and so he gets on her side. So when they get to the temple and she sort of enters this pool of light and is trying to concentrate the power and do whatever, this is the part where I feel like I missed something, because at some point something happened to him where he's like severely damaged, and something happened to his brain where the other Thaumaturges can't anticipate him because he's sort of mentally broken. Anyways, he manages to fight off a lot of the Thaumaturges along with her brother, and sort of wipe them out while she's performing this ritual or whatever. Now, it's at this point that something actually does come down and impact part of the jungle, and it's not on the scale of when the crippled god came down, but a big explosion happens which destroys a lot. Now, does it land on Calor? It might have. Jatal, the Dwami prince, and Skarza, the half-trell, who are hunting down Calor, they find him, and he's like injured, but he can't die. And I think it's because of the curses that have been put on him that he can't die. And it's even hinted that he's tried to kill himself before, which very much does not seem like Calor. But over the millennia, who knows? Anyway, so they go to kill him, and Jatal's like, no, I want you to actually kill me. Like, release me so I can be with my dead love, Andani. I know I can't kill you. So Calor's like, yeah, sure, and just kills him. And Skarza gets the corpse and leaves, and Calor's like, Skarza, I command you, follow me, we're going to go north. And I forget what he says he's going to do, but Skarza just sort of leaves him. And poor sad Calor, screw Calor. There was like one of the Malazan Books of the Fallen where it might have been Toll the Hounds, where we get Calor's POV, and like I grudgingly was on his side, but no, he's an awful guy. So this sort of impact that rained down was prevented from being cataclysmic, I think, in part by Sang, this priestess of light, but also Osurk. So Osurk, like I said, he was chatting with Gothos having this weird staring contest with Gothos, comes to the realization that he's not been a great guy. He hasn't really learned from his mistakes or from his past. He has no wisdom. He has lots of knowledge, but he has no wisdom. And so he finally leaves the Azath house thinking, like, I gotta change, I gotta grow, I gotta be introspective and make some sort of, like, give myself a good long hard look, and something's gotta give. And then he realizes, oh, the people they're using light, my aspect, to call down this thing, and like a second crippled god shattering event's about to happen. Oh crap. So he, in a very uncharacteristic self-sacrificing manner, does something to divert a lot of that power and destruction onto himself. So he it's not revealed what he does, but whatever he does is also stops that from being continent-wide destruction. And in the epilogue, we have Lorik, who is in the Imperial Warren, so the fragment of what had, like, this land of ash and ruin that was the result of the crippled god falling on Kalor the first time. Lorik is wandering through there and comes across Spite with leaning over his father, Osurk. And poor Spite. Lorik's like, hey, what you got there? And she's got the case with the crippled god in it that they took from Skinner. She opens it and it's just all black dust. Because at this point, the crippled god, the events of the crippled god have happened, and the crippled god is sort of translated, or he's gone now. So she had this fragment to get power to attack her sister, and now it's like worthless. So Lorik's like, hey, Spite, can you help me out with my father? Like, he's obviously done something that is not like him. He's tried to help other people, or something like that. So they're like, let's try and get to Kurald Thirland. So, like, the elder Tice Theosan Warren of Light, which Osurk himself had totally shut off and made sure no one can get it and access it, which is why we don't see much of the Leosen, although we do see them now and again. So they bring him to the very borderlands, and then it seems like Light itself says, oh, Osurk, he's returned to us. Great, we're going to take him into us. And then Lorik's like, come on, Spite, let's get out of here, because Light is just all-consuming. And so Light takes Osurk into itself, and who knows what happens. I mean, I guess Kurald Thirland is totally open now and accessible to people. Maybe we'll see more Leosen wandering the world. Spite goes her own way, Lorik goes his own way. So upon Lore, this young thaumaturge who managed to fight off the other thaumaturges to protect Sang, the high priestess, he's very severely damaged and mentally sort of really messed up. So Sang calls on Old Father Moon to come back and heal him, and then he does. Her brother Hanu, the big Yaksha stone guardian guy, he's died in this thing, but it's sort of hinted that Ponlor and Sang, the thaumaturge and the high priestess of light, they're kind of in love at this point, so they kind of live happily ever after, I guess. And yeah, I think that about covers it. Wow, it's a big one. It's a good one though. So I read that it was heavily inspired by Esslemont's time he spent in Southeast Asia. So he worked there for a few years and traveled all around. And so a lot of the culture and the setting itself of this jungle and whatnot are based off that, which is really cool. I mean, lived experience really enhances writing. So it is a long one. It doesn't feel that long. It's not really slow paced, but I wouldn't say it's fast paced either. But it's just a good, solid Malazan book, Blood and Bone. I'm excited to get into a sale, but I need another break. It's been a year since I started this reread of the books of the Malazan Empire. So I've like Knight of Knives, Return of the Crimson Guard, Stone Wielder, Orb Scepter Throne, and now Blood and Bone. So I think I'll read a couple more books, and then I definitely have to come back to a sale and see how it all ends. And at that point in the year, we might be looking close to the release of No Life Forsaken. So I'm going to have to do the God Is Not Willing reread in anticipation of that. But yeah, Malazan continues to be my favorite book series, book world of of all time, and it never disappoints. So that was Blood and Bone by Ian C. Esslemont.